This is a quick video about how to clean out the P-trap, the trap under your sink. And you might want to do that if the drain is running slow, or if maybe you dropped your wedding band or ring down the drain. It will get trapped. I don't know if that's the reason they call it a trap, because it also traps water inside down here, which prevents gases from the sewer line to flow back into the house. That's really what the trap does, but it'll also trap something heavy like a wedding ring if it falls in there. So neither is happening with this sink, but this sink is due for a cleaning, so I'm going to use it as the example for this video. So the first thing I notice is I've got a stopper here that's actuated by this rod, and the pressure is still on here, but normally if I was worried about someone, I'm going to take this drain apart, and if someone comes in and turns the water on the faucet, it's going to come dripping down in here. But number one, I'm going to put a bucket in first. Here's my bucket. Make sure that's deep enough to catch any water that comes out of the tailpiece. This is called the tailpiece. Connects to the sink. And we're not taking that out today. We're going to clean it in place. That requires tools, and you have to put some putty in the top to seal it properly. So I'm not going to mess with this, and I'm also not going to mess with these valves. Although if I was worried that somebody's going to make a mess in here, while I was away, I would close those. But the reason I don't like to close them is because if these were older valves, these are only about 15 years old, but the real old ones, when I come in and I turn them off, and then when I turn them back on, typically they'll leak, or about half the time, and then I have to replace the valve, and I don't want to do that if I don't have to. So I'm just going to leave them on, and I'm going to start the job by loosening these plastic nuts, and this loosens by hand. If I need a tool, I'm probably in trouble, because it's probably because I've got deposits that are locking these nuts up. So let's go over the geometry. And by the way, I took a picture before I started, because this one is not complicated, but sometimes they're a little more complicated, and you want to make sure you get it back together correctly. And the size of this is all 1 1/4 inch pipe, so there's no confusion about sizes. Sometimes there's the size is 1 1/2 inches, and sometimes it's mixed between 1 1/2 and 1 1/4, and then there'll be some adapter that changes it. But this one's an easy one, but you might have more difficult. So you take a picture, be careful, before and after. Oh, look, this back one, that back nut I can't get loose. There's not a, see how on these, there's a thing sticking out that helps me spin it off by hand. And I can spin all of these by hand. Oh, look, that one even fell down. It's ready to fall. Oh, but there's some hair in there, so guess what? This one did need cleaning. And that hair typically gets stuck on the stopper. So, but I am going to need to get a tool probably for this back one. It's not really tight, but I think it's got some deposits in it. So I'm going to pause the video and... Okay, so I went to my car and I got this tool. It's a channel lock plier, and I normally use a smaller one when I do plumbing, especially sinks, because I don't need one this big. But it's a channel lock, so it's adjustable. So I'm just going to make it small to get it about the size that goes on this plastic nut back here. And then I'm going to not put too much pressure on, just get it to start turning for me. Okay, there it goes. Now it might turn by hand. Feels like it's got a lot of crud in it. Let's just get that off. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to mention, so that goes, notice that goes in a little bit, and there's a little bit of stuff in the hole I'm going to get out. That's the drain that goes down to the main sewer line. This is all this stuff's a little bit dirty. Notice this, the seal on here. I leave the seal and the nut on. Notice that the seal, this tapered part goes in here, and the flat part just back here goes against the nut. Okay, all of that, I'm going to take it outside and clean it. Let's see, while we're here, okay, there's the other nut, and notice I didn't take this nut off. I will when I go out to clean it. And I should mention that on this other part here, where this connected, it doesn't have a seal like this. There's no seal on this connection between the bottom of this exit pipe and the trap. It makes its own seal from the way this is shaped on the end right here. See how that's shaped like the seal? So it's tapered. So there's no seal there, but there's a seal here, and there's a seal here. And there's going to be another seal here when I take this apart, down here. You can even see the seal right there. And you see how it's facing, the taper part is down. So those are some notes to use when you're putting it back together. Okay, so let me take that out again. And so because his hair is hanging down, what I was going to point out is it's probably hung up on this actuator rod. This actuator rod goes in, and when the big rod goes up and down, it pulls this up and down, and that moves this rod, changes the angle on this rod. This pulls the stopper down, this lets it back up. And I need to take that nut loose, and it turns out that one's a little bit too tight by hand. I almost always have to use a wrench to take that one off, unless it has a big, like, butterfly fitting on it. So look up in here, you can see there's a nut there, and let's see, tightening, I want to go, I'm looking backwards, so it's righty loosey. I have to turn it to the right to loosen, and it is loosening. So I loosen that, and then I pull that rod out. Now if I had to, I would have disconnected it here. I didn't have to in this case, but the way this connects is it just has this. I'll go ahead and disconnect it. Remember that it was on the number 2 hole from the bottom, and you can see how this part is, this kind of goes on first, and then the rod goes in, and then it goes on the other side. So putting it back in, you're gonna go, say, here's the rod. You're gonna put one side through the rod. And then the rod's going to go through the hole here, the number 2 hole, and then this metal part is going to go back. The rod's going to go through the other hole on the metal part. And let me just do that. Okay, it's hard to hold the camera while I'm doing it, so I'm just going to do it with the camera sitting on the side, and then I'll show you when I'm finished that I got it in. Sorry about that. So now it's back on there. I didn't need to take it off, I was just showing you. Okay, but I do have the actuator rod out now, and so that should free up this plug to come out. Oh, and it's nice. This plug is relatively clean. Sometimes it's pretty dirty, and I need to clean it up. And then I look down here, and that's a little bit dirty. I want to clean that out. If you have a brush, a long brush, you can put in, and you can run a little water if you still have the water on, and you have the bucket underneath, and you can clean that with a brush and make everything come out. And if you see these little holes in here, those are the drain holes. See this, in the sink near the top here, there's what's called an overflow hole. That is, if you leave the plunger down and you leave the water on, the water is going to keep rising, but it's not going to spill over because it's going to go down this hole, and it goes in between the layers of the sink, and it comes out these other holes down here, so you don't have an overflow. But I noticed it is kind of dirty in there, and I might want to clean out that overflow a little bit. And you know, if you drop something, it doesn't look like it would probably go in one of these holes, but depends on, if it was a pearl it might go in there, you know, something small. And sometimes these holes are bigger though, and you might actually get your wedding ring to go in there. I'm going to go ahead and clean this out some just by running my screwdriver around the circumference and pushing stuff down. I'd rather have a brush to do this, but I don't have one handy. And then I'm gonna wash it through into the bucket with some water. Now let's see how things look down here. I still have a little bit of hair sticking on. I just want to clean this up, and maybe I want to, while I have this bucket in here, maybe I want to clean anything out of this exit pipe. See that stuff? I don't know what that's doing in there, but I mean, it probably will come out when I run the water, after I put the sink all back together and the drains are all in place. Anything that I can't get this way, it's probably going to go out. If I had a clog, even after I cleaned out this P-trap and all, I would put a snake in here, and I would run it down into the main drain and try to clear out the clog. But you might want to call a plumber for that. That's typically not a DIY because people don't have snakes at home. But if you have one, that's one way to clean out the drain, is to go in this way rather than going all the way from the top of the sink, you know, because you can't get past first thing you can't get past is the stopper, right? And once you've taken the stopper out, well, you have this hole open, so you might as well go in this way. But so yeah, I clean that out, and I clean this out, and I run water and make sure I have all the stuff that might have been jamming up this hole. Okay, and then probably what I want to do, I'm getting a little bit of water in here, but I need to take this stuff outside and clean it, and so I might want to lay a towel down in the cabinet because this is going to keep on dripping, and I'm going to take the bucket out, so I need to get a towel and lay it down. But I'll do that off camera, and I'll come back after I clean. Well, I'm going to show you how I clean these things outside. I forgot to mention when I was inside that as soon as I take the P-trap off, I want to look inside for anything that fell in. And this one's actually relatively clean. I don't see any. There's a little girl over there. She's my next door neighbor. And yeah, there's nothing inside. I'm making a video, honey. Video, yes, I'm making a recording. Oh, this exit pipe is pretty messy, so I need to clean that. What I'm gonna do, and then I can check in my bucket, make sure I don't have any rings or jewelry in there, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna shoot high pressure water from my hose in here to clean this out, and I'll clean this one out too. And normally I would take this apart. It's already loose. I can do that. Oh, there. Now I have all three pieces. I took that out of there, like that. And then I'm going to get the hose. Clean these up real quick. So I don't know if you can see what I'm doing here, but I'm gonna you see that one? I'm gonna shoot water in there. Cleaned up really nice. Here's the P-trap. It's going to want to shoot water back at me. I got to be careful not to get it on me because that's yucky. Yucky. Okay, I hope I didn't get any on you. I'm dumping out my bucket. Cleaning out my bucket. Cleaning up my parts. I could put this back together if I want now. This upper part is not always necessary. It's called an extension, and it's there because the just tightening it up a little bit. That was necessary because the tailpiece wasn't long enough to come down to the trap. Turn off the hose. Watch out for Hazley, the neighbor girl. Isn't she pretty? She's gonna be a big sister soon. We're gonna have another baby. All right, let me pause. Okay, so I finished cleaning up the parts, and I can put the stopper back in now. Let me just note that I was supposed to tell you before I took this out to notice that when you take it out, you need to know exactly what the orientation is. This part right here, I know, points away from the faucet and towards the front. So see, that hole is going to go in the front, and that rod, that actuator rod, is going to come in and go through that hole, and it's going to actuate it up and down, right? So I got to put it in exactly like that. Okay, and then let me turn the light back on. There. Okay, so now, since I put that stopper back in, of course it's down all the way, which means this rod has to be up. And so I have to, as I put this rod back in, I have to point it down a little bit. And if I can't get it in the hole, I might pull the stopper up a tad, or I might have to take this apart again to make sure I can get this actuator rod into the stopper. But what I'm going to do now is check the stopper and make sure it actuates okay. I'm actuating it by hand underneath, and so I know that I got that rod into the stopper because it's working. So I always double check that, and then I have to tighten this nut up, and getting this nut tight the right amount is not that hard. And the reason is, if I tighten it too hard, the actuator rod is not going to move because it's causing friction. So as I tighten this on, and I turn it to the left to tighten, I want to get it tightened up to where it's a little bit hard to actuate. So I know it's tight enough to seal. If when I put this all back together and run water through, it leaks out of that, then I know I need to tighten it a little bit more. And if it keeps leaking, I'll replace the whole thing. I'll replace the whole tail piece. Okay, this is the tail piece. Let's start putting this back together. Here's the exit pipe. Okay, that goes in the exit, and I can start tightening the plastic nut back there. That's the one that was kind of stuck from having deposits. We have hard water here, so there's a lot of deposits. Now this is what I call the extension that goes back onto the tail piece. Oh, look, I got a couple ants running along my pipe now. And then, oops, I got this upside down. That's gonna have to go like that. Okay, and then this is gonna go up, and it's gonna go like that. Now first I might just tighten this nut up here just a tad, just to hold it in place. Okay, and then this is going to go on there, and remember, that's an important connection. We gotta make that properly, make sure it seals. So there I am, I got that connection on. tight. And this is a good time before tightening everything to make sure you're adjusted and you're vertical, because like if this was too short or too long, it might, and sometimes the geometry is much more complicated than this. You want this to be vertical and you want everything to reach, right? If this was too short, this piece was too short and it doesn't reach, then I need to go get a new one. But as you can see, everything, sometimes this exit pipe will be way over here, so the P-trap then has to turn, and then if the P-trap is turned way over here, then I need a longer exit pipe, right? And they come fairly long and you cut them to length. You just have to cut them to where they go in far enough to seal when you tighten this nut. And I'm going to tighten this without using a wrench this time, even though I used a wrench to take it off. This one, I'm not going to use a wrench to put it back on, and I'm hoping that's going to work. And I'm going to tighten, so all four nuts, all four of these plastic nuts, I'm going to hand tighten. Of course, this one doesn't have the extra little tab on it in back, so it's a little bit harder to turn. It might leak, I don't know. We're going to find out now. What I do is I'm going to clean this out later, but I run hot water through. Maybe you run both hot and cold, so the flow rate is high. And just check all of these. Maybe jiggle them a little bit and make sure nothing is leaking down here. Of course, if you had turned the supply lines off, this would be the time to turn them back on to do your leak test. I don't see any leaks, but if I did, wherever the leak was, I would tighten the nut some more. And if I couldn't tighten it anymore by hand, I might use my pliers to tighten it a little bit with pliers. Make sure it doesn't leak. Okay, then I shut off the water and call it a job done well.